Heaven Blues Channel presents Paranormal, Book 9, Part 4, Legend of the Pharaoh's Curse by Dr. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. The cold was eating through our bones as we headed back through the dark streets to my home, and he was in an unbelievably bad mood. But he didn't forget, in an obvious challenge to me, to buy a pack of cigarettes from a small supermarket that hadn't yet closed at this late hour. In front of my building door, he said he hoped I had a nice evening and wished me good night. "Aren't you going to come up and have some tea?" "No, it's too late." "At least to say goodbye to my mom?" I prompted. "Give her my greetings. I have reasons that demand my traveling tomorrow at 9 a.m., which is early for a Friday." With kindness, I asked him, "The same boarding house?" "Where else?" "Okay, well, I promise you, dear, that everything will be better and more stable very soon." Shaking his head tenderly, he stood by the door waiting for me to go up the stairs in the dim light, and then I could not see him and so realized he had left. My flat is on the 3rd floor, and since my building is fairly old, the stories are quite high and the dry-rotted stairs steep and seemingly infinite. I cast about in my purse for my keys, and then I slowly lifted my head and saw a man standing on the 3rd floor landing above, covered in shadows, his arms crossed on his chest, waiting patiently as if expecting me. Who is he? Is it one of the neighbors? Impossible. They're not given to standing on the stairs at midnight. And what exactly does he want? I couldn't see his face covered in shadows, but something told me that I shouldn't anyways. Mysterious, unexplained horror ran through my veins, making me reluctant to recognize this stranger's face. My heart jumped like a frog. Should I go up, come what may? Impossible. Should I scream? Maybe the whole thing is unimportant, and then I would look unbelievably foolish in front of the neighbors. Either way, screaming would take away the remnants of my sanity. Then go down quickly and catch up with Rifat and ask him to come up the stairs with me. I hurried down the stairs, trying not to break my high heels. I did not dare lift my eyes to see if the stranger was following me down the stairs. The cold night air, the streets, the dim red taillights of Rifat's car as it drove away to a place from which he would not hear me. "You idiot, Rifat! What a nitwit! Why didn't you come up with?" The only thing left for me now is to wake up our neighbor, Fathia, on the 1st floor so she could awaken her son, Hisham, who looks like a gorilla, so he could go upstairs and deal with this dude who has nothing better to do than scaring delicate young girls. Hisham would enjoy tremendously beating up this rude man. At the entrance of the building, I found the same figure of a man in the darkness, but this time waiting at the bottom of the stairs. 5. Escape to nowhere. Wake up from your slumber, for you will defeat every one of your enemies so that they cease to exist. On the street, I walked quickly. I could have run, but I was worried, just as I was worried to scream before, as it would drain my strength and nerves and terrify me. The fading street lamps, a mangy dog looking at me, wondering, and some rangy, disheveled cats fighting over some garbage, with their wide eyes asking what's happening. I wished I could tell them. Fortunately, the corner supermarket owner, Uncle Galal, was there, about to close his shop where I used to buy candy and mints when I was a child, and would buy henna for my hair when I was a teenager. The same grocer from whom Rifat had, just 15 minutes ago, bought a pack of cigarettes. I entered the safety of the shop, pale-faced and limbs cold. The smell of the dry cheese, olives, and alcohol, this mix so sweet to the soul, and kind old Galal's smiling, wrinkled face. "Uncle Galal!" "Did the doctor leave already?" "Yes, could I get a soda?" He shook his head, wondering. "In this cold? Well, if you'd like, but why did you come alone at this hour?" I swallowed hard and began telling him of my short adventure in a shaky, incoherent voice, but he understood my meaning. Therefore his face reddened with anger. He grasped his cheese knife, waving it in anger. "I'll take you home, and just let that son of a try to stand in our way, and he'll only have himself to blame." "He's coming himself." That's how I interrupted him as I pointed to the dark streets and circle of light outside. Screaming hysterically, I saw the sinister shadow coming towards the supermarket, hands in his pocket. I shook uncontrollably, but the grocer was feverish with chivalry. He went towards the stranger, waving his knife and grabbing him by the neck while swearing, "I know how to deal with guys like you who enjoy scaring innocent girls." The man tried to break free, feigning misunderstanding, that there was some mistake, but the grocer was still eager. And here a smile invaded my face. Uncle Galal, that's not the man." "But his face oozes crime." "I didn't see his face as he approached, but now I do. He's our neighbor's husband. And, by the way, he's a supermarket inspector." Galal then started apologizing to the innocent man who had come to buy a pack of cigarettes from his shop, the only shop open at this late hour, and kept telling him apologetically that he didn't know and was just trying to protect an innocent girl like myself. Proudly, the man said, while straightening his clothes, "If you're going to threaten with a knife everyone who tries to buy a pack of cigarettes, then don't expect your supermarket to be successful." He then stuffed what he bought in his pocket and left with annoyance. For a few seconds there was silence. The old grocer started slowly closing his shop, though my patience was running out. He then linked arms with me, as if taking his daughter to school on her first day, and said, short of breath from the cold, "Let's go." He was shaking, coughing, and breathing hard. I felt strong empathy for him. We walked very slowly, a few steps towards my house, which he knew very well. Suddenly I noticed the man. For sure it's him this time. He was standing under one of the street lights with his arms crossed on his chest, the shadows covering his face, just as I had seen him in the stairwell of my building. "It's him this time." I said it, and my arm tightened on my handbag. He said, "Wait here." He said it sternly and then walked extra slowly towards the challenging shadow, walked until he drew very close, and then I heard his angry voice saying, "You, mister, stop messing around and playing with people's—" Why did he stop talking? Why did his face freeze in such a weird way? Why is he swaying? Why is he holding his chest with his hands? But even worse, why is he falling to the ground? Something in the stranger's face had seriously freaked him out. He freaked out so much that his weak heart succumbed. Or it's some kind of hypnosis, or a blackout. What's important is, either way, I have lost my only bodyguard. I have to escape. I have to. But where to? I started running, hearing nothing but my high heels on the broken asphalt. I was wearing a coat, so the cold didn't bother me much. There was a dog perturbed by my running. It howled, and it seemed like it was thinking of pursuing me. But for some reason I don't know, it started moaning and running away, its tail between its legs. I didn't dare look behind me. But I stopped once and took off my shoes, and with anger I broke the heels off in order to run more easily. This was no time for me to look elegant. "Rifat, I wish you were here to explain what's happening." Entering one of the side alleys, I started running, and running. A building with number 12 written in chalk was my friend Hind's place. The most important thing is that the entrance not be locked. Thank God it's open. More important still is that I not find that stranger standing there waiting for me. I don't know how, but I understood instinctively that this matter was something supernatural and something paranormal. Something more mysterious than just some bum following me. But he wasn't there. I started knocking on the door hysterically, tears gathering on my cheeks and the sound of my crying ever increasing. The sound of a lock being opened, and the old apartment door revealing the face of Hind's father wearing PJs, and behind him his startled wife. In confused sentences I related what was happening. They took nothing from my talk except that my mom was dying, but between tears I gathered my strength and aimed downstairs, saying, "A man from our street. He's not stopping. The grocer." The father looked in astonishment at his daughter, who put her arms around me and sat me at the table while her mom brought me a cup of water. Finally, I regained the ability to speak, so I started telling them the whole story from the time I left Rifat until I came here. "Is he still standing there?" "Maybe. I don't know." Heading to the window, the father opened it and peered into the night outside. "Is that the man, my dear?" Rising nervously, I peeked from behind his shoulder. Yes, it was him, standing under one of the street lamps with his arms crossed, as was his habit. He prefers the light coming from above, so as to hide his face in the shadows. "Yes, it's him, Uncle, it's him." Closing the window, the father began unbuttoning his pajama top while mumbling something about going down to face that bastard and find out what he wanted exactly. He asked his wife to hand him a heavy mallet from the kitchen, to be used as an improvised weapon. But I clung to him in fear, saying, "No, please, you haven't seen what happened to the grocer when he saw the man." But, "Please, I beg of you, I'm safe here. Please just let me stay with you until the morning." He seemed relieved, for he, and I don't blame him, did not truly want to go through that situation. Also, he did not have a phone from which to call the police. "And your mom? How do we tell her?" Shaking, I said, "Leave her. She won't suffer any danger except for worry, but she will forgive me in the morning when she finds out what happened." And with that, Hen's mom offered me some sandwiches and a cup of tea. Then Hind brought me one of her nightgowns and led me to her bedroom, acting cheerful and asking me subtly about Rifat. She sat on the bed cross-legged and started showing me her engagement photo album, criticizing this girl and that woman, while I was totally absent-minded. Snakes of worry were eating through my heart. And you can understand that, sister. How does my mom feel, and what is she saying right now, when her only unmarried daughter is so late in coming back at 3 a.m.? Poor Rifat. You'll be the first suspect in the case of my disappearance. But I didn't know that my mom wasted no time. She had called Adil in Siham's home and started crying hysterically, in response to which Adil cursed Rifat, saying I should never have trusted a nutcase like him. As for Siham, she mentioned that her left eye had been twitching involuntarily for 3 days, which was enough proof that I was dead or, at best, dying in some hospital. Adil went searching the city in his car, as he did not know my girlfriend's addresses nor where Rifat was spending his night. He even took 10 strong policemen from his station to search for me, under every stone in the city and on top of every morgue table and hospital bed. All this while I was sitting on the bed, listening to Hind's blabbering. I woke up at 10 a.m. on Friday morning. I freaked out and jumped out of the bed as if stung, hastily dressing and grabbing my bag while running outside. And in the living room, I found the small family sitting at the dining table having breakfast, their faces lit with friendliness and refreshment. "Come, dear, wash your face and then come have breakfast." "But I'm late." Sipping the rest of his tea while perusing the headlines in the newspaper, then pulling his glasses down to his nose, the father said, "You're not leaving before breakfast. I'll take you home myself." And so I went to the bathroom and washed my face in front of the mirror. What tired features and puffy eyelids. Last night's events were really tough. May God never show you a night like this, girlfriend. Going back to the dining table, I sat as Hind smashed some beans in a bowl for me. She then added some oil and said, "You slept a lot." "Like a log. And I really am very thankful to you." With open appetite, I started eating the beans and toast while the sweet smell of incense in the kitchen tickled my nose. The scent came from the kitchen where Hind's mom was preparing the breakfast. From afar, I could hear the sound of Quran being recited in preparation for the Friday prayers. How kind and sweet is the Egyptian family. Hind's father looked at me over his glasses, asking, "Ready to go?" "Yes, please." And I kissed her hand and her mother, who made sure to send 1,000 greetings to my mother with a recommendation to me to hurry up and get married so as never to be alone any more. And then I walked behind the father, going back to my home. And in the daylight, the alley seemed to me such a sweet and happy place. Then something small grabbed my attention, something underneath the streetlight where the stranger was standing last night. There was the corpse of a dog, his features clenched as if he suffered tremendously as he died. And a few steps away, the bodies of 4 dead rats were scattered. "What killed that dog?" asked the father in wonder, though the question seemed silly to me, indescribably silly. 6. Some danger. When I reached my home, I found a scene that exceeded all of my expectations. For as soon as my sister Siham thanked Hind's dad for bringing me home, and as soon as she shut the door, She turned into a rabid wolf. Squeezing my arm with her fingers, she asked me what happened, and she clenched her teeth in an animalistic way. And my mom was in a worse state still, while my neighbors, whom you girls know, mothers of Sharif and Bulbul and Sanat, those hags, sat clucking and mocking with spite. Moments later, Adil entered, and his greeting to me was even sweeter still. "Where were you, young lady?" 2 hours later, Rifat barged in, screaming frantically, "I drove her here personally, I swear." It was rather difficult to tell the story of last night, but I told it while shaking. As soon as I finished, silence prevailed for a few seconds. Nervously, while patting me gently on the shoulder, Siham asked, "What do you all think?" Distractedly, Adil said, "Attempted assault, and we see dozens of these on a daily basis." "And what do you think, Dr. Rifat?" While lighting a cigarette, Rifat replied mysteriously, "One question seems to bother me. Is it linguistically correct to ask who attacked her, or what attacked her?" "Is there a difference?" "Linguistically, yes, a huge difference." Happy with his intelligence, I shouted smugly, "Yes, yes! I myself sensed something strange in all of this." Putting one leg over the other, Adil asked wonderingly, "What's so unusual about all of this?" Contemplating his smoke rings, Rifat said, "Ponder with me on what has happened, Adil. There is a person waiting for her at the door, and she cannot see his face. A person who knows her address and the time she returns. Someone who goes down the stairs with lightning speed, without any noise whatsoever. A person who follows her through the streets, and the dogs don't chase him but rather run away from him. And as soon as the miserable grocer sees his face, he falls directly to the ground. Do you find all of this familiar in your case files?" He then looked at me victoriously and continued, "I even met him in the theater last night, and whenever I tried to see his face, I couldn't find him. I told you so, and you thought I was crazy. I was distracted. Here they all are, all of them sitting here for me. How sweet they are, so unbelievably sweet. They all spent their night awake, even Rifat, who drove back here directly as soon as he reached Cairo. Oh, I love you all. I can now leave this whole problem, and even myself, to them. The shrewd Siham will suggest something, and Rifat, with his wisdom and experience, will find the answer. And brave and powerful Adil will protect me from any harm. So don't envy me, girls. I will pray to God that you all be as happy as me." Adil was saying, "You're a master in deducing wrongly, Rifat, and your talent in extracting horrific results from obvious things is well known. Remember the mazes we went through together with the human cannibal?" While putting out his cigarette, Rifat said with embarrassment, "Before you wrong me, let me tell you something I did yesterday by official order from the Antiquities Authority. But please, I would like the women to leave us for a bit." "You got it." When she finished boiling the eggs, Siham handed me the hot kettle and a tray of cups, and whispered deviously, "He really loves you." My cheeks reddened like tomatoes, and I whispered back, "I don't know." "Well, he was dying with worry for you. For the man who leaves the phone dangling and rushes to jump in his car to drive back to Alex just 15 minutes after returning from there is a man in love. Watch out, fool, you're going to drop the teapot." And we headed to the living room, where the two men continued their long conversation. Adil was tensing up. As for Rifat, he looked like someone defending a lost case. "And thus you find me in a true bind." "And why Hoeda specifically?" asked Adil, "since he was after you?" "I don't know, but I'm sure the intended target of what happened to her was me, and then, sensing my presence, he stopped his talk short. I told them that we had prepped a light meal, as neither one of them had eaten since the morning. They sat at the table and began eating like men deprived, and courteously Adil said, "Hoeda, certain reasons compel me to stay with you and your mom, for this week at least." "And Siham?" "She'll go back home for the kid, or they can both stay with us here. It's all the same, but I prefer the first option." "And Rifat?" He stopped chewing and gave Rifat a meaningful look and whispered, "No place for him here. He'll return to Cairo, and should be careful not to be alone." I didn't understand a single word, and my stomach clenched, feeling the intense atmosphere that foreshadowed danger, the atmosphere dripping from Adil's every word. Midnight. I sleep in my locked room while Adil waits half asleep in the living room, his gun holstered and his feet resting on a wooden chair in front of him, and next to him the radio playing one of Abdul Wahhab's songs. My mom sleeps in her room, broken from tiredness, and from the threshold of the door sneaks the dim living room light, and the tick-tock of the clock, and the sound of my even breathing as I lay between sleep and wakefulness. Is it the mice? For sure it is. The sound of something rough rubbing against the lock of the wooden window. The sound grew louder with a strange insistence. I could swear it was the sound of fingers feeling the window frame. I got out of my bed and tiptoed to the window, and in the dim light I could see that sharp blade entering between the slats of the shutters, trying to lift the lock. I tried screaming, but my voice stopped short in my throat. I could only run towards the door, to the living room, shaking Adil to wake him. Jumping up as if stung, Adil retrieved his gun and rushed to the bedroom behind me and turned on the light. And in front of our frightened eyes, the blade continued trying to lift the lock on the window. Either this thief is a fool or he's not deterred by the light. Adil put his finger to his mouth to silence me, then went towards the window, and very carefully he lifted the lock and opened it in a dramatic move. Was that one of hell's doors opening? I only remember screaming frantically, and Adil pulling me out of the room as violently as he could, while that unbelievable and indescribable thing flowed into the room. Despicable, sticky. It had 2 human hands. Other than that, I don't remember. Together we ran to the living room, violently locking my bedroom door on that thing so it couldn't come out to us. I screamed, "Oh my God!" Adil roared, shaking, and my mom woke from her sleep and emerged from her bedroom, rubbing her eyes. "What's happened, kids? Have you gone mad?" From between his teeth, Adil said while snapping the magazine into his gun, "A nightmare. Something so heinous, the likes of which I have never seen before, entered from the bedroom window." "And you didn't shoot it?" "I didn't dare. The rules of the material world do not apply to it. And I couldn't get my head around it to..." And here we heard that sound of friction. This thing, or person, trying to open the bedroom door. It won't be long before it succeeds, and then... the loud ringing of the phone. I ran to answer, yet my eyes did not leave my bedroom door. I could hear Rifat's voice screaming, "Howeida, is my pack of cigarettes still in your handbag?" "Are you joking, Rifat? You have no idea what's happening here." "Please, listen to me. Get rid of the pack immediately. Throw it from the window. There's no time to explain." "But my bag, with what's inside it, is still in the room with him." "With whom?" I didn't know what to say, so I stood staring at the bedroom door, which started to give way. Adil, muscles flexed, did not know what to do. And clutching her head, my mom didn't understand any of this. The door gave way. Like someone possessed, Rifat repeated into the phone, "With whom, Howeida? With whom?" End of part 4. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more upcoming content.